Welcome back to Loose Frame Podcast, brought to you by our friends at Blind Tiger Coffee. My name's Tyler Martin Olich. Joining me as always,
Sam Allen and
Birdie Doyle.
How you doing, ladies?
Pretty good. How are you?
I am wonderful, with the exception of horrible traffic this morning, which I somehow missed, which is unusual for me.
Yes.
Insane.
Isn't
That's
it funny?
insane.
Usually Tyler's the one to be like, oh my God, I'm trapped in 2-hour-long traffic. But instead, every single one of us, including our guest, was stuck in that 2 hour.
I literally thought it was the rapture this morning. I was like, where are all the cars? And it was because the bridge was closed.
Yeah, no. And all the rest of us are just like, it's been 2 hours.
Yeah. Sorry. Well,
That's
make
all
up for
right.
it. We had a great interview.
We did.
And who are we interviewing today?
Christian Blauvelt. He now works for the Tampa Bay Times, but he was a former IndieWire columnist as well as Entertainment Weekly. He's been a film journalist for many, many years, and he came to tell us some of his stuff. So that's really interesting.
Journalist, author, film critic. He was the digital editor for IndieWire, worked for the BBC.
That part.
Many, many things he has done.
Including writing a book that I think we should get for our set here, the Star Wars at a Glance, or what was it? Star Wars Simplified?
It's kind of like the beginner primer for Star Wars.
Yeah.
But he also wrote
Maybe
a book about World War II film history, specifically in the Tampa Bay area, which we're going to track down.
And I want to say, this is my special film Tampa Bay fascination, is that we have movies from the 40s with major names in them that we don't promote at all because they were so long ago and we weren't a film commission then. And I mean, it's in a place that doesn't exist anymore. But he mentioned Air Force and I freaked out backstage. And then he mentioned Strategic Air Command and I freaked out backstage.
That with Jimmy Stewart.
The other one has Spencer Tracy in it. These are not small town D-list actors.
And this is when, I think during the interview I mentioned Hollywood Goes to War, and that's kind of an actual colloquialism for the time period where it was the Department of War that was funding a lot of these movies to kind of get the American people engaged in supporting the war, because previously it had been very isolationist. So they were putting huge celebrities in these movies and sparing no expense to create them. And most of them, or a lot of them at least, shot here in Tampa Bay.
This is Birdie's Roman Empire.
This is
she's
my
obsessed
special
with it.
interest.
Yeah.
And there are some movies that we promote over and over and over again for good reason. And then there's some movies that you just kind of scroll IMDb and you're like, hold on, this was made in Tampa in 1943. We don't have record of that.
Yeah.
I mean, Dale wouldn't have had record of that, right?
No one had it. No.
You know who does? Christian.
Because he wrote the book on it.
We have to bring him back in as our historian and just be like, okay,
100%.
listen, we need help putting our database together.
Literally.
Give us the book.
Well, with that, I think we've teed this up enough.
Yes.
With that, we'll be back with our guest. Welcome back to Loose Frame Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tyler Martin Olich, and joining me is author, writer, journalist, man of all seasons, my friend Christian Blauvelt. How are you?
My God, it is such a pleasure to be here, Tyler. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I've been so excited. When we were looking at kind of our lineup for the podcast for the upcoming year, I was like, we have to get Christian on. Like you are one of the most fascinating people I've ever talked to. We've become good friends over the last couple of months, and a couple of years actually now. And I'm just so happy to have you here.
Oh, I'm so in awe and impressed of what you've done for film culture in Tampa Bay. And just, my God, the sheer number of productions that are filming here now, it's such a dream. I think what you've done here is so aligns with my own philosophy about, I just joined the Tampa Bay Times as the assistant managing editor of digital engagement in January. And I believe in local. I believe in this area. I believe in the potential of my brand. I believe in the potential of the Times. I believe in the potential of Tampa Bay as a destination for major film productions, which we're already starting to see.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. When I did not pay him, this is completely organic as far as I'm concerned. But you're right, and part of that is broadcasting the talents of the people locally. And you've been doing that your entire life through journalism, through I mentioned author. You've written 10 books. You've had a wild career, though. Everything from Entertainment Weekly to BBC. You've interviewed everyone from Daniel Day-Lewis to President Trump. Wild career path that is. But I like to always start these interviews just kind of some backstory, because I think people find it interesting to see that, people can come from a variety of different places and get to various places within the entertainment industry. So where did you actually grow up?
So I grew up right here in St. Pete. I was born in Bayfront Hospital, went to high school in St. Pete. I love this community so much. I was there for the very first Rays game when I was 11 years old, March 31st, 1998. I was there when the Lightning played at Expo Hall, at the Florida State Fairgrounds. I remember when it was the Thunderdome before it was Tropicana Field. I have such a connection to this area. I ended up going to school in Chicago and then living in New York for 12 years, because at that time, 2008, when I graduated, it was like, if you wanted to have a career in media, especially if you wanted to cover culture, if you wanted to be a film journalist specifically, you really needed to move to New York. But all those years, I always found ways to shoehorn in little bits of my love for Tampa Bay into everything that I did.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. All these years later, you've somehow swung back, and now you're not only living back in the Tampa Bay area, but you're working for the Tampa Bay Times.
Oh, I'm so excited about it. Yeah, I moved back during the pandemic and, worked remotely for IndieWire the last few years as their digital director. I was managing editor and executive managing editor before that. But this opportunity at the Tampa Bay Times to, be a representative for digital strategy in the newsroom was so exciting to me, because I really feel like the future in so many different ways is going to be written locally.
Yeah.
And the Tampa Bay Times is such an extraordinary brand, incredible history, 14 Pulitzers, and I feel like has a way to bring its journalism to people to go where audiences are.
Yeah.
In a way that's just so exciting. And, so for me, it's like, this area, this area is obviously just incredibly beautiful. It is growing so much, just the sheer number of people who've moved here. There's so many different, incredible kinds of stories to tell here. This area has been a home for film production, like going back to the 1940s. And, it's waxed and waned a bit over the years, of course, but like the potential here for what this area could offer for film production, for media in general, is just so exciting. And, a lot of my work has been in video production in the past. I'm so excited at the Times. We've just since I got here, we've now produced, in part because of our amazing video producer, Justin Cicheron, we've produced more videos this year in 2026 than we did in the entirety of 2025. So we're really scaling things up and excited for the future.
That's amazing. So let's rewind a little bit. You are in college in Chicago. Journalism is a hard gig to break into, right?
Yeah.
And you were kind of not quite where it was in the downswing, right?
But getting close.
But what was leading you to become a journalist and specifically cover kind of culture and film?
So I was particularly in love with Entertainment Weekly for a number of years. Actually, when I was in my senior year of high school here in St. Pete, we went on this retreat in January of 2004. It was super cold. I got knocked into the river from canoeing several times. And I remember shivering in my cabin afterward, trying to warm up, reading my Entertainment Weekly and knowing that's where I really wanted to work. And so I laid the groundwork then in my years in college to, get to know some people there and ultimately get a job there. It was actually an internship first, right out of college. And then that became a full-time job. And I was there for about 5 years. And, but it was hard because when I graduated, it was 2008. It was the economic collapse.
Yep.
Just within a few months, they laid off a third of the staff within a few months of me getting there. And, it's hard. I had no money, basically. I, just have to get a quasi-legal sublet in New York City, just to get by at all. And, it was, the kind of place at that time, there weren't as many protections either for journalists. So I didn't have even health insurance for years. But I got all these wild opportunities to, cover events and meet people and create connections and, learn journalistic fundamentals that I have stuck with me to this day. And it really was the launch pad for everything else that's happened in my career.
Yeah. I know Star Wars has a certain place in your heart, and we'll kind of lean into that a little later on. But was there something growing up, maybe it was a particular film critic that you like to read or engage with, or a way that media and culture was being recorded and journalized on, that you said, I want to do this specifically?
Oh, absolutely. And, this is not a political answer. This is a genuine one, because the St. Petersburg Times then, was my hometown paper. It was Steve Purcell,
Yep.
our local film critic. I'm
Know
telling
Steve
you.
well.
Yeah, I'm telling you, like, after I got the job at the Times, I had dinner with him up in Safety Harbor where he lives on like December 5th. We still stay in touch. He's fantastic. Literally, he mentioned me by name in his farewell column, like in 2018. So it's so funny. If you go back, like I've been mentioned like in the Times over the years in many different ways. And he mentioned me as like, a friend, and I was working for the BBC then. And also Eric Deggans was a huge inspiration for me. And, he and I are really dear friends. He actually he left St. Pete last year to take an amazing gig at Washington and Lee University in Virginia, but a huge loss for the Tampa Bay area that he's no longer here. I'll always remember, like, there's that photo of him like holding his TV remote like against his chest, almost like he's a gunslinger, and that was his byline photo, his author photo. And it's like, oh, that's so cool. I love that. I mention that to him all the time. I don't I think it makes him a little uncomfortable because but it's that image of him is like, I want to do this. I want to be in media. And at that time, it was so amazing to think that, you can do that for your local publication. You don't have to be in LA or New York. And the economics of our business have changed a lot, that, it's more like, we can't really just cover things that are happening nationally as much. You have to really find the local lens. But there's still so many ways to cover culture in a way that's meaningful. I mean, we've had reporters covering, the Paul Giamatti movie that's been filming on St. Pete Beach. Obviously, A Land Remembered is now shooting as well. And, it's just, there's still a lot of opportunities for that. But no, it was absolutely those two guys at the Times who were like, oh, yeah, this could be a career.
Yeah. The days of like Roper and Siskel and Ebert, and the way we reviewed films religiously in the papers, right?
Yeah.
Like you'd wake up on Friday and you check out the reviews to see what you were going to go to the weekend with your family, right? To the theaters too. That's kind of changed quite a bit over the last couple of years. And we've I think it's now you have, your Metacritic scores and, crowd aggregated reviews. And half the time I wonder if these people actually even seen the movies or if they're just piling on. But do you see the change in people's respect for reviewers, or is it now it's like I'd rather listen to what my neighbor says than what a reviewer says?
I think word of mouth is always hugely important for sure. I think that, there is real value in, I mean, we want there to be conversations just among the public at large. We want there, if we're talking about culture in general, it's like if people aren't having a conversation there and it's only happening among critics at a professional level, that's unfortunate, because that means that it's not getting out, But I will say, if there's any area where there has been a bit of degrading of the discourse, it's actually that, I think the studios have been giving a lot more priority to influencers rather than professional critics. And sometimes these influencers, who get earlier screenings and everything, they are there really almost, in a paid capacity.
They're part of the PR machine.
They're part of the PR machine. And so it's interesting to see how there can be like a couple waves of reviews coming out now. There's like the initial like hype of certain kind of like fake critics who are like really puffing this thing up. And then like a week or two later, then you get like the real critics like actually, putting some cold water on it. I don't know. I love, like, I think it's great when, the community at large can be involved in driving a conversation. I'm a little more skeptical of the influencer culture. But, I still think that there is absolutely room for professional critics. And I think that the best thing about criticism is that it can help you engage with a work of art more meaningfully. It can help you to think about it in a different way. I'm less interested in puns or, snappy takedowns of something. I'm less interested in as much as I do still follow like the fake Gene Shalit Twitter account.
Yeah.
I love it. Just going back and looking at some of those, like just that kind of approach doesn't really like more the TV kind of criticism approach doesn't really mean as much to me. I knew, but Roger Ebert was like, he could do everything. I mean, he was great on TV, but he was an incredible writer as well. I did know him a little bit when I was in Chicago, and it was just at the very end of his career, and we only really communicated via email because he couldn't speak at that point. And just the inspiration and impact that he had for so many is just incredible and still an inspiration to me.
I know you've covered cultural events at large, but since this is a film podcast, maybe we'll kind of steer it more towards film. Do you remember the first movie you had the opportunity to review or to cover?
Oh, that's a really great question. I think it would have been for my college paper. It would have been for my college paper. It would have been for the Daily Northwestern. It was I think it was Tarantino's Grindhouse. Actually, yeah, and which I liked, but I also was like, there's a little bit of like a poser thing here. Like it's not quite like it's like replicating something that was more authentic than this is. Yeah. So there was that. I remember. I think I actually reviewed like the second like Jessica Alba Fantastic Four movie. I remember that being around there. So these aren't like great pinnacles of cinema by any means that I was first involved in writing about. Actually, one of the first things I did when I was in college was I worked for Allied Advertising, and it's become like Allied Global Marketing now. We know if you're involved in film at all in the Tampa Bay area, they put on many of the screenings and press screenings and everything. They handle most of the press screenings for all the markets in the country outside of New York and LA. And so I was involved on the PR side as well, like helping with the campaigns for there was a movie called like Midnight Meat Train that I was involved in.
Well, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember like Spider-Man 3 came out around that time. And I remember they staged a beach volleyball contest out on the North Shore beach in Chicago because the character was the Sandman and that. And so I was involved like sort of on the business side, the PR side as well. But reviewing those early films at Daily Northwestern, that was a lot of fun. But I will say like one of the first things I did was actually I was in the high school journalism program at the Poynter Institute. And that's where I got to know Steve Purcell one-on-one. And he gave me a lot of advice there as well about, writing about film. And so, yeah.
Were you it sounds like you were, but were you a huge consumer of media growing up? Were you like I'm at the comic book store reading as much comics as I can, watching every TV show? I mean, what was kind of drawing you in? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I was definitely a geek when it was not cool to be one. Like I watched all the Star Trek shows, super into those. I wasn't like, it's funny. I only really got into comics when I was in college. That was just like not something that was really part of my childhood at all. But yeah, I was super into the Star Trek shows, obviously Star Wars. I did read like all the 90s Star Wars novels and everything. So I was super into all of that. And then I got like, as time went on, I got super into Turner Classic Movies and ended up just watching that channel voraciously and catching up on like the full, remember like in the 90s, there was the AFI list of the top 100 American movies and like watch every one of those. And now of course, it's like, I put a little stock on that list, but at the time, like, as a kid, I was like, that was great. And I mean, it was, there was like a stronger film culture nationally back then. Like every year we get one of those AFI shows. Like we don't get anything like that now.
No, it's sad. Not that I also put a lot of stock in those lists, but like Barack Obama listing his books he read every year. Like I do like being challenged by like, hey, here's 100 movies. Have you seen any of these films?
Exactly.
Like, and then inevitably there'll be a couple that slip through the cracks. Like, oh, I'm going to track this down. I'll see this.
Yeah. And that's for me as someone who's written a lot about film. It's like I'm most interested not in like withering pans or takedowns or being snarky or making it just all about my writing. I'm more interested in just like if I find something that I love, I want to share it with you.
Yeah.
And I want to have it be like, oh, I'm not like so cool or smart that I like know this thing that you don't know about. I want it to be like, no, I want to bring you in. I want you to, be part of this experience too. And, because we all benefit, like, that's the way to create like a more positive film culture, more inclusive film culture, one that, where you can have really good conversations.
you went from Entertainment Weekly to the BBC.
Mhm.
Let's kind of journey through your
Yeah.
career path here.
For sure. So, yeah, Entertainment Weekly, so many opportunities and strange things happened there. It was just the kind of experiences that you can have living in New York are just so strange and so unique. And then when I moved to the BBC, I was the deputy culture editor for BBC.com, and I appeared on the BBC World News Channel doing segments. They have the show called Talking Movies. It's fantastic. I mean, you could dive into such unique topics. Like if I wanted to do a whole segment like about Kenneth Anger or experimental film, I could.
Yep.
And I did. But that's where I got really more involved in the festival scene, going to Sundance, going to TIFF. Those were the two main ones that I went to every year, in addition to like the New York Film Festival. And, that was, I mean, I started to run a portrait studio every year at TIFF, and we used to have, my God, we had like the whole cast of Moonlight in our studio before, just as buzz was building. Oh, wow, this is a great movie.
Yeah.
So many amazing experiences, and it was like, wow, yeah, really getting to know people. And it's like where I started to develop this, because I also was doing a lot of moderating for SAG-AFTRA and BAFTA at that time. It's where I started like developing this sort of like rules for engaging with celebrities, and
which we're going to talk about here in a second.
Okay. Well,
I love
we'll
press junkets and just how terrible they are. So we're going to talk
Exactly.
about all this.
Okay, we'll get to that.
So you just mentioned just offhand Kenneth Anger, and that's what I love about you is your deep knowledge. So Kenneth Anger, legigendary LGBTQ filmmaker, what was it? Scorpio Rising, LaPuce Moments, like so many amazing movies.
Fireworks.
That's not Fireworks. Yes, that's not a name someone casually drops.
Right.
And the fact that you did so casually tells me that, and I knew this already, but you have such a deep knowledge of film. Was this through your education, or was this all self-found?
Partly. So, I mean, the film program at Northwestern is incredible, and so a lot of that did come from there. There was like an experimental film class that I took that was delving into all those figures. But the thing that was great about all of that was that it also just like inspired me to continue to seek these things out. And so I always want to keep challenging myself and keep finding new films, new filmmakers that, I've never seen before, and that, really might add something to my life. And, and it's the thing, like, I think, sometimes when if you drop a name like Kenneth Anger or whatever, maybe that could be daunting to some people, but that's where I really want to be like, no, this is just something really cool that, you should really check out. And, you might like, hey, like Scorpio Rising, that's like the first movie to really use like a lot of pop music that had come before as like a song score, and it influenced, American Graffiti and Scorsese and Tarantino and all these others. And, it's like the whole idea of the song score kind of like starts there. And it's one of those things, like just not making things like a club and like, film knowledge and film culture, making that cliquey, but making it more like, I always say like there was a friend of mine who, like in 2022, when Sight and Sound named John Dielman as like the #1 film of all time, he was like, oh wow, I've never seen that. In fact, he had never even heard of it. And I was like, but that's okay, because imagine you've got the first time experience of watching that ahead of you. That's such a cool thing. I don't have that experience.
This is bending a little different direction. Do you think like a platform like Letterboxd is exposing more people to films they would never have otherwise touched upon?
I actually think so. I think it's, it's especially with their 4 favorites, such a great rubric for social videos. Very inspiring to me as someone who's, in part leading a social video strategy. It's just a great, like, to see someone just like share movies that are like really important to them. That's such a cool thing. That's like, and it's inclusive. It's about bringing people in and building a real culture, building real discourse. It's great.
I love that. In your career, you've had the opportunity to sit across from many more famous people than who you're sitting across from right now. Again, we started off with everyone.
Point. I don't know. Don't sell yourself short, Tyler.
But everyone from Daniel Day-Lewis to, again, President Trump, and so many people in between. And something I've found in my career, actors hate interviews traditionally, and they hate press junkets. They want to be anywhere else or talking about something other than themselves, which always seems strange, because I think there is that idea to kind of paste them into corners of narcissism and other things. But
Yeah.
I think they would rather talk about someone else's movies and careers.
Oh,
but you
100%.
have done this so often and so many times, and you kind of have your own internal rubric of do's and don'ts.
Very much so.
Well, kind of walk us through how you approach interviewing celebrities.
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, I think it's really important, first off, to have an icebreaker, to really put them at ease and, set the tone in advance, because I think, gotcha questions will just shut things down. But, I think that if you can relate to them first off about something that they're really interested in, that is not just about themselves. I think they often do really hate talking about themselves. So like if you're at a party and Steven Spielberg is there, like don't just go up to him and gush about E.T. changed my life or whatever, No, like go a little bit deeper. Maybe there's a film that you saw that he introduced at the TCM Film Festival or on TV, or, something that he's really passionate about. He, like, I know, introduced this restoration of the movie Giant recently at the TCM Film Festival in the past year or two. And it's like, maybe talk to him about that, or that he was involved in, being one of the talking heads in this Val Lewton documentary or something, like, like get him interested. Like he's so into film history and so loves talking about film history in general, that like engaging with him on that level is so much better than just getting him to talk about himself. And, so I think that's a really important thing. Find those icebreakers. When I had Daniel Bruhl at my portrait studio at TIFF, I knew he's from Cologne, Germany. I was planning a trip there myself recently, so I like asked him, for recommendations, and he was so into that and like wrote all these down. He gave me his email address. He sent me more later, and it's like just finding ways to engage with celebrities as humans and not as, oh, this is just a really, don't gush as much as you can, really. And there are a couple of exceptions in my career on that point, but, just engage with them as humans and, find ways to interact with them that makes them feel comfortable. And then you can get really more interesting answers after. I mentioned as well, when I interviewed Paul Thomas Anderson, along with Daniel Day-Lewis for the Phantom Thread, BAFTA post-screening Q&A that we did. It was so funny. I was interviewing him. I was telling him, hey, I really love this video that you narrated for the Criterion Collection about Max Ophuls and how much those films have influenced you with your long takes and your close-ups. And he got so into talking about that his publicist literally had to be like, hey guys, you're needed on stage. The Q&A has to start here. But that really helped to warm him up. And, which is such a great thing. And, it's just like putting people at ease, I think, is really important. You can engage with them just so much better. I would say as part of that, so I have all these rules. Don't ever ask for a photo with a celebrity. Never. You're a professional. I also think that there's just sort of like a point of pride. Like when you're in a setting like that, consider yourself an equal.
Incredibly tacky when I see people do that.
Incredibly tacky, but also consider yourself an equal. It's like, hey, I'm a professional doing a job. They're a professional doing a job. You don't need to, suddenly make this a different kind of thing. That said, unless it's a really toxic person or they have a strange history or they make you feel weird, which of course then certainly refuse. I would say if a celebrity asks to take a photo with you, then usually, yes.
That's permission to go ahead.
Yeah, then you should, because actually that could be really awkward. Like Grace Jones asked that of me, and it's like, that would have been really awkward.
No, Miss Jones, we're not going to do that.
Exactly. I mean, can you imagine if I had said that?
No.
So, there's so many little things like that. I think, the one way that I could say that, maybe some gushing is allowed is if there's something really obscure in a celebrity's filmography or some work that they've done that, you might want to talk to them about, that hey, I really love this and no one ever talks about it. I think there could be real value there. That's the kind of thing, I did mention once to Richard Jenkins, for the Shape of Water BAFTA post-screening Q&A, like beforehand when we're just like hanging out for like a half hour. I mentioned to him that there's a line from the movie Shall We Dance that he said that I like quote all the time, where he's like, it's possible. It's possible. It's like this thing like some, no, it's totally not possible. But, and it's like, I quote that all the time, and he remembered it right away. And it's like, that's like kind of a fun thing. But generally it's like, and that's the kind of thing that he's not really like shouted out for all that often. I would say like if it's like an absolute stone cold legend, and depending on how the conversation is going, there is all of these maybe have some exceptions. The one time I am like truly, the only time in my entire career I've regretted not taking a photo with a celebrity was when I had Liv Ullmann in my studio at Toronto, and I literally have the photographer right there. So I can't believe I didn't ask this. She's such a legend. I love her work so much. Ingmar Bergman, my God. And, we'd had an amazing conversation too. We'd actually just had a long conversation about how much she loved the movie Spring Breakers. So see, Tampa Bay always comes back. It always comes back. She was like a huge fan of that movie. She loves Harmony Korine. And it was like, oh, I do wish that I had gotten a photo with her there. But and that was also an occasion where I did gush. I think I actually did say to her that this one moment in the film Autumn Sonata where she's like at the piano and like staring at Ingrid Bergman, and who's playing her mother, and there's all these like years of longing and sadness, like, wow, I wish I could have had a better relationship with my mother, and all just like written on Liv Ullmann's face at that moment. I did say to her that this is like the greatest acting moment I've ever seen, and she accepted it, like, yes, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I love that. I mean, you don't have to answer who the actor might have been, but have you ever had an interview just go completely sideways on you?
Ooh, no, not really. I will say a lot of times the actors who aren't as famous, who are at sort of like a mid-tier level, like you're probably going to have more difficulty maybe with attitude or personality than those who are like much bigger stars. The much bigger stars are generally very nice. I will say that, as much as Hollywood is, dominated by a lot of unpleasant personalities, like on the business side, in terms of on-set behavior, you really do benefit by having someone who's just a nice person, who's not an asshole. Like, just not being an asshole is such a benefit to our industry. And so a lot of times the people who are the really big stars are quite approachable and quite willing to talk. And I haven't really had that many bad experiences at all.
You've also been an author. You've written 10 plus books, some about some cultural touchstones like Star Wars. We'll get to that, I promise you.
Sure.
But you've also written about film history as well. And kind of the Hollywood goes to war era, where Hollywood was really spun up as almost like an arm of the Department of War.
That's right.
To be like the propaganda piece to win the war with. And a lot of that was shot here in Tampa Bay.
Yes.
Many movies.
Absolutely. Quite a few. Well, there's so many different connections. First off, Nelson Pointer, the longtime editor of the St. Petersburg Times, was actually directly involved with as a liaison to the Hollywood studios and the War Department in terms of like how Hollywood could help craft messages and present a vision of why this war was worth fighting. America had been very isolationist, like right up until Pearl Harbor. And so, articulating why the war was worth fighting was so important. And that's a huge part of what my book is about. So Nelson Pointer from this area was a big part of that. But also, many films were shot here. There was the Howard Hawks movie Air Force for Warner Brothers, filmed in Tampa. Tampa stood in for both Hawaii and the Philippines. And so it was like a Drew Field, which became Tampa Airport.
Which people living downtown Tampa now is like, how are you making that work? But rewind, there was very little.
Very little. Yeah. Exactly. It was like, it's just a lot of palm trees.
Pristine beaches and palm trees and scrub brush everywhere. Yeah.
Exactly. It could be Hawaii or the Philippines pretty easily. Like, not a lot of work was needed back then. What's amazing about that is that, so over the Gulf of Mexico, Howard Hawks was always really known for like filming aerial scenes and filming airplanes in flight. And so they had painted at least one fighter plane with Japanese colors. You've got the red sun. You've got, to make it look like that it's a Japanese fighter plane that's about to attack. And so that there was a U.S. Navy ship out in the Gulf of Mexico that was not aware that there was a movie being filmed here. And so it actually did fire in the Gulf of Mexico on this fighter plane with Japanese colors on it. And, it's so funny, like what a Japanese fighter plane could be doing in the Gulf of Mexico. How that could ever be explained, who knows? But they saw it and they were like, they must be here, and so they fired on it. Luckily it was not hit, but there were quite a few movies made here back then. Like there's a really great Esther Williams movie that I love with Peter Lawford and Ricardo Montalban called On an Island with You, that was filmed on Anna Maria Island. Again, meant to be a South Pacific paradise. But even just a few years later, there's the Jimmy Stewart movie Strategic Air Command.
I think we actually have the poster downstairs.
There's an incredible aerial shot in that movie of him flying over Pinellas County. And you can see like St. Pete Beach, not yet connected to, via the Bayway.
No, that was a 2-hour drive around the bay.
Yes. I mean, so, this area has been conducive to filming for so long.
Yeah.
And that's an example of me like really shoehorning that stuff in because, into that book because, I mean, those are major productions. So it's, they are worth writing about. But it's also just like, hey, this area has a really rich history and I want to shout it out too.
Yeah. And you've also written extensively about Star Wars as well. What about that franchise, other than just being a cultural phenomenon, really meant something to you?
Yeah, I just think that the family dynamics, the emotion of, the father-son story is so powerful. I think that, it does tap into something very primal and archetypal and, so much has been said about it, being like in that Joseph Campbell tradition of the hero's journey and all. But I also think that, George Lucas in the 70s, I mean, that first Star Wars movie is very experimental. I mean, it was made for only like $11 million. Just the guts to go and film it in so much of it in Tunisia.
Out of sight, out of mind. The studio can't meddle too much when you're that far away.
And it's like, and it's a really personal film in so many ways, which I think is what's part of why it's endured so well because there is a real personal stamp to it. But yeah, for me, I mean, I grew up reading so many of the spin-off novels in the 90s and, I never really thought that, I would write, Star Wars books myself, but this is another thing, I think for anyone listening to this, watching this, who, might want to go into film journalism or, pursue culture journalism in any form, just understand that your career is going to be a really winding path. And one thing may lead to another in ways that you don't expect. I did cover Star Wars a lot for Entertainment Weekly, and that was even before the Disney sale. I loved the Clone Wars animated series. In some ways, I think that's like George Lucas at his purest. It's his obsessions and quirks and everything are in that so well. And so I covered that very well, but it wasn't that like brought me really to the attention of DK, the imprint at Random House that ultimately offered me the first book. It was because I had written these very snarky recaps of the Roma Downey produced show, The Bible, that was like around 2013. And, the show had its merits, but it also did oddly present Satan as looking exactly like Barack Obama, which was not, that did not escape anyone at the time. And but it was like I explained a lot of these like complicated concepts and storylines in a way that was a little snarky, but they thought at Random House, like, oh, this is someone who could explain all of this about Star Wars very easily. So the first book I wrote for them was called Star Wars Made Easy, which was just a primer for new fans. Because even after Force Awakens came out in 2015, they realized that they had a huge problem about bringing new fans in, bringing new audience in. That first film really played to the old audience. If you think about it, Force Awakens, it was very much a nostalgia trip. And like, where do you go from there to like bring new people in? So, just having someone who had written for a magazine, knew how to write to fit, knew how to explain complicated concepts in a very distilled way, lent itself very well there.
Yeah. For every Andor, you kind of have a book of Boba Fett, and I have a varying opinions on Book of Boba Fett. But do you think the current slate of Star Wars, particularly their TV side, will have the same cultural cachet as the original movies did and does now, but maybe in the future they'll, I don't know, be remembered fondly.
Yeah. I don't think so as much because I think it's for me. I generally liked Force Awakens and Last Jedi. I think no one likes Rise of Skywalker.
I don't think the actors who made it
I don't think they like it either. I think that where the franchise really went off the rails was with its streaming proliferation. I think it's the same thing that happened with Marvel as well. I think that when you just think of storytelling more as content rather than as storytelling, that's really where you go amiss. And Book of Boba Fett, I agree, is not great. Although I did tell Robert Rodriguez in Austin a couple years ago that there were parts of it I really liked. Like I thought that he did kind of bring his directorial stamp to it.
You can definitely tell it's a Robert Rodriguez job,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Just like there was at least a personal element to that, whereas like some of these others, like anyone could have made this. It's totally made by committee. I mean, Andor is clearly the best one, but I think Andor will continue to be thought of fondly, and I think it's just extremely well written and well acted, and I think that the approach that they took, was extremely unique. But I don't know. I think like The Mandalorian just relying so heavily on Baby Yoda, and it does feel like, wow, we're really infantilizing this franchise.
I was kind of shocked. They released what was it, Comic-Con or whatever it was. They released the first scene from Mandalorian Grogu, and I was like, there's just random cutaways to Baby Yoda that don't seem to be furthering anything. And it's just like, what is going on? Like this is just slowing down the entire pace.
And it's one thing if like, okay, Baby Yoda had a moment in 2019, plan to that. They, of course, famously botched the whole rollout there because they didn't have any merch. They didn't have any like Baby Yoda plushes that they could sell then or whatever. They only did like a year or two later. And then by that point, it's like, wow, we're still just beating that same drum.
Yeah.
Again, it feels like this really is devaluing the entire franchise. And right now, look, we're about a little less than a month out from Mandalorian and Grogu coming out as of our recording this, and it's tracking lower than Solo. So I don't know. We'll see. But I do think that the franchise as a whole is really searching for an identity.
You've spent your entire career covering culture, and this is where I'm going to nerd out a little bit and ask you some more cultural specific questions. We can, especially people who love film, can look back to the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and really see filmmakers who defined a generation. Who have you been following in the last decade, 15, 20 years that you think is going to be the next Martin Scorsese of the current generation, or someone that 20 years from now you're going to look back, it's like they had the finger on their pulse of the culture of millennials, of Gen Z, Gen Alpha, whatever that might be,
Absolutely.
Who's that going to be?
So I will say that I don't know if that person's even going to come from the US, because the films and the filmmakers that I've valued the most over the past 5 to 10 years have definitely been coming from outside of this country for sure. Jia Zhangke from China. Every movie, I literally did like a whole career rewatch just in advance of his last movie. I think extraordinary. I think, absolutely should be discussed on the same level as a Scorsese. I think that, there has been a real crisis in American indie filmmaking in particular, in terms of like figuring out how do you square the economics of filmmaking with having a really personal vision and doing something that's really meaningful.
Is there anyone in that space doing it well?
I mean, I would say Barry Jenkins for sure, but you have to look even there. Like he had to make his Mufasa movie as well, because the economics are that tough.
One for them, one for you, as they say.
Exactly. And that's fair. And that's totally fair. And sometimes you can really put a personal stamp on a big budget Hollywood movie. I mean, I love big budget Hollywood movies. I mean, you might have gotten the sense even here. I mean, I love the 40s and 50s in American cinema, which is all that, But Barry Jenkins is definitely one. I think I think David Lowery has really made incredibly interesting movies consistently for years. I think I have to say, like, Lulu Wang for me, is an example of a really gifted artist, a really gifted storyteller, filmmaker who also has to embrace that the format challenges and who has to embrace the fact that you might need to tell stories in different ways now. I have to say her series Expats that was set in Hong Kong, that's like maybe better than any American movie I've seen in like 3 or 4 years. And there's this one like 2-hour episode of that was called like Central. That was so extraordinary. And it's like, but she comes from the indie film space. Her film The Farewell was at Sundance, but now she's making a 6-part series for Prime Video.
Yeah.
And, she's a great Florida filmmaker as well. She, was based here in Miami, obviously in a relationship with Barry Jenkins and Barry is a great Florida filmmaker as well. And, Moonlight is one of the great Florida movies of all time. But, it's really hard. I think that, what I found, especially in my last few years at IndieWire was, wow, there's a real existential, crisis here that's, and which is why I think that the path forward is to think ever more locally. I would actually say to, Barry Jenkins and Lulu as well, like, really consider getting back to making a film in Florida. Really consider, getting back to your roots because you've done some really great things. But I think, connecting with communities and building community locally is going to be so essential. And
do you think with sort of the ubiquity of cell phones and younger audiences in particular consuming media in verticals, it's going to lead to kind of an 80s style VHS revolution where we're going to have these lo-fi filmmakers popping up and really telling personal stories for their communities?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was, Milk and Cereal a couple of years ago. It was like made for what, like $600. And then, oh God, I'm sorry. I'm sure you remember the filmmaker's name more than I do at this moment. But he then did his next film was at Midnight Madness at Toronto. And so it's like I think really going lo-fi, it could be a way to go. I mean, think about it, like genre is horror is especially conducive to
I just
this.
saw it was Undertone, which was made for, I think, under $200,000.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I think one thing to consider is that indie filmmaking may now be genre filmmaking. And that, I think, God, I mean, Ty West, one of my favorites, but can really scale up or scale down, in terms of how hi-fi or lo-fi, and just thinking about, I think a filmmaker now has to really think about their audience in a way that maybe they didn't have to before. You can't just make a movie for yourself now. There has to be a little bit almost of like the creator economy feeding into it. Like, if you're a YouTuber, you're looking at those comments all the time.
Yeah.
You're constantly iterating based on that feedback. That's very different from the auteur model, where it's like, I'm making this as a work of art. This is my vision.
Yeah.
And I think you do have to think a little bit more about your audience, your distribution.
So I love that framing. So filmmaking becomes less and less a medium made in a vacuum within your own head and your own interests, and more about connecting with the audience and responding as real time as you can to their reaction to your filmmaking.
Exactly. And I would not think of that as like diluting the creative process or diluting your vision. I think it's more about creating community. And I think that that's where maybe there is a sustainability that can emerge in where filmmaking is going next.
We're coming up in our hour, and I certainly want you to be able to plug your books. But before we do, and to end on kind of a recommendation style note, we mentioned Letterboxd earlier. Where should people be going now to challenge themselves and find new content, new movies? Because with the consolidation of all these streamers,
for sure,
which is great in one respect because now you have all this archive of film being more and more accessible, but then it's hard to find anything because the algorithms push it into obscure corners, and you'll never find it unless you know to look for it. So if you were an audience wanting to challenge yourself, where can you go to find new stuff?
I would say, don't be afraid to get lost when discovering film. Because there is so much out there, but really just feel free to take a chance. I think you can spend so much time just scrolling endlessly, going over tile after tile after tile. But, if you want something more curated, obviously the Criterion channel is incredible, especially for distributing new movies now. I mean, my God, they have like Be Gone's Resurrection on there, which is like one of the most mind-blowing 3 hours I've had in quite a bit of time, in quite some time. I think that, but honestly, like think of some of these streamers as sort of being like a digital library. Like when you go to the library or what used to be like a video store, you would browse.
Yeah.
You would. It's so funny.
I always call it the old Blockbuster wall, right? You start on one side, you just slowly walk around for the course of an hour, and you kind of look at everything.
Alex Ross Perry has that fantastic new documentary called Video Heaven out, which is about the whole history of video stores. And there's this line that I love in that's about like a video store is a place where your body can move at the same rate as your mind.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's so good. But kind of think about that. Like if you like Canopy, I think is an incredible streaming resource in terms of just, the sheer variety of stuff that's on there, and like the foreign films, small indies, but like recent Oscar winners, like Honora went there like right away. And I think that, you've just got to really be willing to get outside of your comfort zone. I think that a lot of times we talk so much about how there aren't as many ways to get movies to people now, but I do also want to challenge the audience to be a little bit better too. I think some of it has to go on the audience. Like you have to be willing to push yourself out of your comfort zone a bit, and be willing to really discover new things. I mean, I will, and that's like, for me, like, watch the films of Zsa Zhang Ka, watch, but then every now and then, like, I will say, like, if you're ever at a film festival, just go to a movie, that you know nothing about. Just sit down there. I've had like some of the best viewing experiences ever, just like walking into a movie that I've never seen.
Yeah.
There was this movie at Sundance in 2019 called Greener Grass by like these two amazing women. It was Jocelyn DeBoer and oh God, but it was this movie was unlike anything I'd ever seen, and it was like one of the best 90 minutes I've had at a film festival ever. Not touted in the slightest. No, it was on no list of like you got to see this at Sundance, and it was so great. And don't be afraid to get lost. I think about it, like, it's so funny. The travel host, Rick Steve, says that a lot about like when you're in like a European city, just
wander around,
go with the flow, wander around, don't like, I have to have a rigid itinerary, but I will say like festivals are still a really good way to discover things like that. And luckily, we have some festivals that are really growing here. We've got the Sunscreen Film Festival
coming up
very
soon. And Gasparilla is always here. Dunedin Film Festival. I think there's 21 total festivals in the Tampa Bay area. So before we end and we'll let you plug some stuff, 4 movies that people should be thinking about this year.
Oh, okay. So I would say, oh, wow. Okay. This is a really good one. 4 movies that they should be thinking about, like just from 2026 or...
Yeah, something that should be on the radar.
Yeah, something that should be on the radar. I would say Miroir, number 3 by Christian Petzold, which just played at the Gasparilla Film Festival. I had a great time seeing that there. That's really important. Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie, definitely.
Played a green light, not about the band. Nirvana, very interesting film.
Yeah. I would say Resurrection is debatable whether it's a movie for this year or last year, but Resurrection by Be Gone, just wild experience. It can be a hard watch at times because you have no idea where this is going, and it's so out there. It's on the Criterion channel, but I think it's really worth your time. And the 4th one, wow, that's a great question. I would say Epic, Elvis Presley in concert.
Okay.
I am also a huge Baz Luhrmann fan, and I have to say that actually like seeing the style of like the 22 Elvis movie like actually applied to like actual Elvis is pretty extraordinary. So those would be 4 for this year.
All right. Well, we appreciate it. Well, we got to wrap it up now. Christian, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me, at CT Blauvelt on Twitter, X. You can find me at Christian Blauvelt on Instagram. And, you can find my work at the Tampa Bay Times. Please follow TB Times on X, follow Tampa Bay Times on Instagram. We have, beefed up our video strategy so heavily there, and I think are telling stories in such a dynamic way now, and I'm really excited for folks to continue to see how we grow and cover this community. And put a spotlight on you as the people of Tampa Bay. We care about you. We want to tell your stories. We want to connect with you and be a part of this community. You see all the time, like other media outlets, New York Times, they kind of helicopter into communities like touristically. And no, we are this community. And so please check us out at Tampa Bay Times. And gosh, I really appreciate all the time that you've given me today,
It's been a pleasure.
Tyler.
It absolutely has. And I always enjoy our conversations. I'm sure we'll have another one very soon. But
I can't
with that,
wait.
Christian, thank you again. And for our viewers, we'll be right back. Welcome back, Loose Frame Podcast. Well, that was an awesome interview. I have known Christian for a while. We've definitely shared some cocktails over the years I've known him, and we always end up talking just about nerdy movie stuff.
100%.
But he is just fascinating. He's had such a long and successful career. He's talked to so many amazing people. And written books about everything from World War II movie history to Star Wars, right? I mean, that's a incredible career.
When I first met him, I remember you were telling me about him, and I pretty much backed him in a corner, and I was like, tell me everything about the Star Wars books you've written. Because I also love Star Wars, and I read the books with my dad growing up, and there's so many of them. And I was like, oh, you wrote 10? Which ones?
I have a friend who's a Star Wars content creator, and he reviews the novels. And during this interview, I was over here texting my friend Alex, being like, do you want me to set you up with this guy? Because he's read all the novels.
He's written all the novels.
I
Do a
too have read
podcast together.
all of
That's
the
all I'm
novels.
saying.
Well,
I'll set him up with you then.
He,
What was that?
well, they don't even exist anymore. They put them into Legacy. So,
eBay,
or
though.
actually not Legacy. They call them Legends now.
Oh, yes, I did know
Legends
that
of
from
Star Wars. Well, Christian is first and foremost a huge cheerleader for Tampa Bay. Grew up in St. Pete. His career led him to Chicago and New York, worked for the BBC and all kinds of other news outlets. But he eventually, just happenstance, kind of almost fatedly ended up back in St. Pete. It's been really, really interesting to see the transformation that's been happening at the Times as he's been taking the digital side of the paper in different directions. But I think more importantly, he kind of hits on the importance of film criticism and how we find and discover movies. So that's what I want to know from you guys. Like, where is it? Word of mouth? Is it letterbox? Like, where do you guys hear about new movies from?
So this, I loved this topic, sitting in the back and talking about it, listening to it, especially because one of the things he had touched on was like the influencers and things like that. And I feel like for me, it's 50-50, where I'm on book talk and film talk and things like that. So there are definitely people on there where they'll be like, hey, do you have a movie that matches this vibe? I've got 5 ideas for you. And there is a fine line between the ones that are like, oh no, I just love movies and I'm going to tell you about the ones I genuinely love, and the ones that are like, yeah, I was on a red carpet and now we're going to talk about this thing. And there's
I thought
both.
it was boring, and it's like, we were taking pictures.
No, and there's a fine line, but I actually do use TikTok quite a bit when I'm looking for new movies, and I share them and things like that. And another thing, I don't know about you guys, do you guys read reviews before or after you get out of a movie? I read them after.
My partner hates this, but I will spoil a book. Like when I get a new book, I love books. I will read the last chapter, last page first.
Last chapter is insane.
Yeah, because I don't want to get too attached to a character if I know they're going to be dead by the end. But I do the same thing with movies. I will review them to death before I go see them. Like I will sit there and go through every single critical review I can find of a movie before I ever go in. The one exception was I went to see Undertone a couple weeks ago. It is by far the best horror movie of the year. I'm saying it now. I might change my mind when Hokum comes out in a couple of weeks. I can't wait to see Hokum. But amazing. And I went into that no understanding what I was going to see. I didn't even know what it was, right? I just knew the title, and I was dragged in by my partner, and we sat down. I was like, oh, it's a horror movie. I wasn't expecting that. And it turned out to be just fascinating.
See, I don't know about you, Bertie, but I like to go into movies mostly blind. And then as soon as I get out and I've digested and I'm like, this is what I think, I like to go and read reviews by both professionals and by lay people, because I like to, sometimes when there's negative reviews, even if I disagree, I think they're hilarious, so I'll read them. But then also taking that and reading like a professional's opinion and what they got out of it. One thing I really like about that is a lot of them have historical context.
Mm-hmm.
And so there have been movies that people have thought of as boring that really touched me because I've read or I've watched a lot of things that involve some similar genres and things like that. And that's where people like Christian comes in, where he has kind of this whole overview of film and the history and the different things. He's very well versed in it. And I feel like we still need that sort of thing. But I don't know if you guys read reviews by professionals or just...
What about you?
So I was going to say, my answer, like short answer long or whatever, long answer short, is social media is where we find new movies, right? I am on, just like the algorithm knows that I hit that double tap to like it on like when the Mermaid trailer came up. So I've got the Fandango and the Variety and the Deadline. They pop up even if I'm not following them. That's where I'm finding new movies and I save them. But I don't read the reviews ahead of time. I don't like having any opinion when I go in because I notice that there's a YouTube critic I like. I don't have any opinions anymore. There's no brain in my head. It's whatever he says. I'm like, yeah, he's so right. So I had to stop reading reviews ahead of time because I didn't want to be influenced. I didn't want to go in knowing like, it's probably going to suck, you know? That being said, I think it's important that we say that there's a difference between you and Sam and I watching movies and having opinions about them and other people because we have an educated film background. I don't know about you two, but maybe that's not, but I studied mostly film criticism and theory at UT, not production. So if someone pops up on my TikTok, like there's a couple guys I kind of trust, but even then they're like, it wasn't I'm like, well, I don't know if is it a bad movie or are you like a film lover and you're like, I didn't really like the characters. Are they good characters or did you not like the character? So grain of salt for all of them, honestly.
I don't think my production background has ever influenced me watching a film.
It influences my opinion on if you're going to be a reputable source.
Well, I guess I could see that. But like the only thing I will tell you my film background has done is I love horror movies, but I am stone cold in a horror movie. Like I've never been surprised. I've never been afraid. Like I see the tells coming miles away. And then everyone around me is like, oh my God, that was so scary. I was like, I don't know. You didn't see that coming?
We were going down a hallway and there's a creaking
what do you think was going to happen
armchair.
Otherwise, I don't. But what I was going to say is that in addition to religiously reading as many reviews as possible, I try to follow actors I like too. So like Kyle Gallner, right? Kind of an indie darling guy, shows up in all kinds of weird indie movies. For every like one smile he does, and there's nothing wrong with Smile, but it was kind of a formulaic movie. He makes a movie like Strange Darlings, right? Which is just like batshit crazy.
That was insane, that movie.
Awesome film. So I find it when I find an actor who's making interesting career choices, I try to follow them where they're going.
Daniel Radcliffe for me.
Well,
he's always doing weird stuff, and I'm like, I need to see it. What you doing next, Dan?
Post, good for him, by the way. Post Harry Potter, it's like I'm going to be as strange as possible.
I really appreciate that, but I appreciate where all three of them. I know we're not talking about this, but I appreciate that they didn't all try to like keep going with huge franchises. I like that they like went to college, bought an ice cream truck or whatever. I'm so serious. That's what he did. That's what the ginger one did.
This is surprising. Rupert, whatever his name is.
Rupert Grint.
But yeah, I do love that whole thing of finding actor who does really interesting and diverse work. Yeah. Because it's like, you're never going to see the same thing twice. And even though Smile was formulaic, his work isn't going to be.
No, yeah, he's always very interesting. I'm probably going to get some hate comments for this, but like even like Sydney Sweeney, I feel like she makes really interesting choices for films. Like Housemaids, I walked in, speaking of one, like, or Housemaid, whatever
it is. Housemaid.
The Housemaid.
Like, I did not read that book, didn't know it existed, had no idea, and I was dragged to that one. And by the way, I was the only dude in the entire theater at the time. But I was
honestly shocking to me.
This is interesting. Like, where is this going to go? And then the movie like restarts halfway through. It's like, what is going on? I don't understand.
So crazy enough, I did see that movie in theater, and I had listened to the audiobook, and there were more men in that theater in mine than there were women. I mean, there were some women too, but I was just kind of like, oh, so we're all here to see Sydney, huh?
Well, that's what our audience is, but whatever.
But it was funny.
It was just
she was not as good as the audiobook actress, unfortunately. However, the audiobook actress, she really went for it.
I'm currently trying to stay away from following actors. I don't want to see the same faces over and over again. And I feel like I'm really seeing the same faces. So what I've been appreciating is movies where there's like one A-lister, because there has to be, but then the rest are unknowns. So I'm not really following like, I like that.
When I say I'm following actors, I mean, Sydney Sweeney probably is a bad example because I think she's kind of approaching that super
She's almost
saturation
done.
A-lister. Okay.
Wow.
That's
she
a hot
is.
take.
It's like
but-
they shoot horses, don't they?
But I generally try to find kind of weird indie actors who are just doing interesting things.
Yeah.
So, what else did we take away from the interview? I thought there's just so many different things. I've not interviewed a lot of celebrities, but I've been at a lot of press junkets,
Mm-hmm.
and it is an art to getting these people on your side in a very short amount of time,
Mhm.
because it's usually like a cattle call, right? Like it's not just an interview with Christian.
It's 20.
It's like 20, 30, 40,
It's a
right?
cycle,
And they're
yeah.
there for hours, and they do not want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like Christian makes it really easy to talk to, though.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he doesn't come up feeling very stuffy, feeling very like, hi, we're here to do a job. When he comes and talks to you, it does feel like, hey, we're going to have a friendly conversation. I feel like it's really easy to put your guard down when you're talking to
He's
him.
done the research, and he's
Yeah.
clearly just a fan of movies, which
Mhm.
I think filmmakers appreciate, right?
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
you've seen things, you followed my career, you know things about me that other people might have not even bothered to learn or watch.
Yeah,
Well, and that's-
oh, sorry.
No,
about that.
you go
I
ahead.
was going to say, he walks the fantastic line between, oh, I am a big mega fan of movies, but I am not a weird fan of you that's going to make you feel uncomfortable
Yeah.
and too seen, you know? And that's an art to walk that line, being like, I have so much knowledge about this industry, but in a way that is not going to feel overbearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the issue that I think people are having now, the conversation that's happening, is that they keep putting influencers and social media people on the red carpets. I know that's different from what Christian does, but I think they're probably seeing both sides of that, and they're like,
Well,
yes,
I-
Christian,
100%.
I don't
please
think we
come
need to
interview
look
me.
further than the Oscars this year, where they
I
had
know.
most of the red carpet interviews done by influencers, and they were terrible. They didn't know who anyone was. They clearly
No.
hadn't seen any of these movies. They weren't prepped.
So what's really
It just felt
interesting,
bizarre.
sorry about that.
No.
What's really interesting is, since I am on Film Talk, this is like a subject that's really interesting to watch from this side, because all the people I follow on Film Talk are completely against influencers being on the red carpet because they don't have media training. They don't know what types of questions to ask. They are just, their whole thing is being like, I'm trying to get this, like what he was saying, this PR move to my audience, rather than I'm trying to ask the questions of these actors and these professionals. And so
Well, they're also, if we're talking strictly people that go from social media content creation, they can do that 1,000 times over and only put out the best shot. It's not the same with the red carpets. And
no,
I say that as someone who does the GIF red carpets, and it's like, make my back sweat every time, even though I'm prepared for the one person I'm supposed to be interviewing tonight.
No, and you
It's
could
still
tell
scary.
in the live format they were just floundering.
No, it's awful.
it's
It
rough.
wasn't great.
Anyway, but it's to your point, is that I think by seeing the influencers too, and the more that we get those, the people that are being interviewed by the Christians of the world are going to be so much more, which is actually interesting, because maybe they'll share more. Maybe we'll get like the most interesting interviews now because there's that like contrast.
Yeah, could be. Well, with that, I think we need to wrap it up because we did go a little long with the interview. Any final thoughts about the interview?
I think we're going to get one of Christian's books for sure. But
Yes, it'd be nice having on our shelf with all of our other Made
Yeah.
in Tampa books.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, to wrap it up before we do our goodbyes, we have a page on our website that is entirely listing out movies that were made in Tampa Bay. So if you're ever curious, we took the time to like pull photos, pull filming locations. You can go in and see, like, Magic Mike was, partially made at this bar in Ybor City. Then you could go to that bar. It's all right
Yes.
there. No paywall. So
No paywall. And
Yes.
actually, we get all kinds of journalists that reach out to us to say, hey, what is Film Tampa Bay? It's like, actually, we got a page for that.
Yep.
And we do.
Here you go.
And try checking out Strategic Air Command if you can find that online anywhere.
It's probably on AMC or Turner Classic Movies, I
I'm
have to
sure.
imagine.
Canopy.
Yeah.
I'm glad he
Yes.
mentioned Canopy.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Canopy.
Well, with that, we need to wrap things up. So let's close it out as we always do. Miss Birdie Doyle, where can they learn more about us?
You can learn more about Film Tampa Bay and Loose Framing Podcast online at our website, Film Tampa Bay, on social media at Film Tampa Bay across the board. You can tune in anywhere you listen to podcasts, and you can watch us on YouTube at Loose Framing Podcast, Film Tampa Bay. That's Loose Framing Podcast, Film Tampa Bay, or Film Tampa Bay across the board. How many times can I say it?
Well, if they haven't learned it now, they are disappointing us. So with that, we're going to close things out. Continue to follow Christian's career, guys, if you're watching this, and definitely tune in to Tampa Bay Times. Support journalism at large, whether it's for film criticism, reviews, or otherwise. Journalists need your support now more than ever. And with that, thank you guys for watching. We'll be back next time.